Ella walked through the front door, tired from school but expecting the usual warmth of her home, only to find silence hanging in the air like a heavy curtain. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting striped patterns across the living room floor, and for a moment, it felt almost unreal, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Her mom, Rachel, was away on a business trip, and that left her dad, Michael, alone in the house, sitting by the window with a distant look she had never seen before. He wasn't scrolling through his phone or watching TV, as he usually did when he had a quiet afternoon. He was staring at an old family photograph on the wall, his eyes soft but sad, and there was a kind of tension in his shoulders, like he was carrying something invisible yet heavy. Curious and slightly worried, Ella tiptoed closer, not wanting to disturb him but feeling drawn to understand what was happening in her father's mind. She followed him silently into the kitchen and saw him holding a folded letter in his hands, running his thumb across the edges as if the paper contained a world he had longed to touch. His expression shifted as he read it, a mix of longing, hesitation, and a subtle excitement that made Ella's chest tighten. It was an emotion she hadn't seen before in him, and it made her heart beat faster, wondering what kind of thoughts were behind that gentle, almost vulnerable smile. She noticed how carefully he handled the letter, almost reverently, and how he seemed lost in memory, his mind somewhere far beyond the walls of their quiet home. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of rain from earlier that morning, and it gave the moment a strange warmth, as if the world outside had paused just to let her witness the secret side of her father. She wanted to ask what the letter said, but something inside her held back, respecting a boundary she didn't fully understand. Michael finally set the letter down, sighed deeply, and looked out the window again, his gaze distant, thoughtful, and almost melancholic, as if he was weighing choices, reflecting on feelings, or remembering moments that had been long forgotten. Ella's mind raced with possibilities. Was it a memory of her mom? A note from an old friend? Or perhaps something entirely unexpected? She couldn't know, but the quiet tension made her feel both anxious and intrigued. For the next hour, she stayed nearby, watching him move around the kitchen, making tea, pausing at times as if caught in some invisible emotional current, and noticing tiny gestures, the way he twirled a spoon, the way his fingers lingered on the counter, the subtle shifting of his eyes that seemed to trace patterns only he could see. Each small action painted a picture of a man who was not simply a father sitting at home, but someone with depth, longing, and emotions that extended beyond the walls of their family life. Ella felt a mixture of empathy and fascination, realizing that there was a private world inside her dad that she had never truly seen, a world full of hidden feelings and quiet reflections that made him more human, more complex, and somehow more alive than the routine parent she thought she knew. As the afternoon stretched on, the sunlight began to fade, turning golden and soft, and Ella sensed that this quiet, intimate moment, filled with unspoken emotions, gentle longing, and subtle mystery, was just the beginning of a story that would reveal itself in ways she could never predict, leaving her both anxious and eager for what would come next, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter of her father's hidden emotions to unfold. In the days after that quiet afternoon, Ella began to notice changes in her father that she couldn't ignore, small yet significant shifts in the way he moved through the house and the way he carried himself, as if something inside him had woken up from a long sleep. Michael no longer sat by the window lost in thought for hours, but he hummed softly while tidying up the kitchen, and sometimes she caught him smiling at his phone with a gentleness that was almost mesmerizing, a smile that seemed reserved for someone else but carried a warmth that filled the room. Ella watched him more closely, realizing that his laughter lingered longer than before and his movements were lighter, less burdened by routine. He seemed more present in the small moments, pouring tea carefully, arranging the living room cushions with care, and even pausing in the hallway to glance at family photos with a reflective, almost tender expression. Curiosity pushed her further, and she began noticing patterns in his behavior. He spent more time in his office, closing the door gently behind him, and sometimes she heard muffled laughter or soft murmurs from inside, as if he was sharing stories with someone unseen. One rainy afternoon, while she was doing homework, she overheard him speaking on the phone, his voice quiet but carrying a softness she had never associated with her father before. "I miss our conversations," he said, and his tone held a longing that went beyond casual friendship. The name Clara floated across the room, and Ella's heart skipped a beat, not from judgment, but from fascination, realizing her dad was forming a connection that felt deeply emotional and sincere. It wasn't reckless or careless, it was a delicate bond built on understanding, trust, and shared thoughts, and Ella felt a strange mixture of worry and admiration as she listened from the doorway, careful not to intrude but desperate to understand. Michael's connection with Clara seemed to awaken something inside him, a side of his personality that had been dormant, a sense of curiosity, affection, and gentle excitement that radiated in small gestures, the way he lingered on messages, the way he seemed to pause in hallways with a thoughtful smile, and the way he carried a softness in his voice even when no one else was around. Ella noticed that he started leaving little notes around the house, reminders for her and subtle messages for himself, as if he was trying to balance this new emotional energy with the reality of family life. Dinner times became a little more animated, he shared stories with her that were richer, full of emotion, and sometimes paused to look at her with a sparkle in his eyes, a spark she hadn't seen before, realizing that his heart had found a place to grow even in her mother's absence. The days blurred together in a rhythm of quiet discovery, school, homework, observing her father, and noticing how he navigated this emotional awakening with care, making sure that his actions didn't disrupt the family but allowed him to feel alive in a way that had been missing. Ella began to understand that this bond with Clara was not about replacing anyone, it was about emotional companionship, the kind that made a person reflect on their own life, remember the value of attention, and feel connected even when physically alone. She saw how he wrote long messages, paused before sending them, reread his words, and smiled softly as if the other person could see the warmth he had hidden for so long. It was a romance of thoughts and feelings rather than touch, an intimate dance of emotions across distance, and Ella felt a strange mixture of relief and awe that her father could feel so deeply without hurting anyone. Over time, she noticed subtle ways in which this emotional awakening changed their home. The laughter in the evenings felt more natural, conversations with her father became richer, and even her mother's absence didn't feel empty in the same way, because Michael had allowed himself to feel fully, to engage with his emotions openly, and to bring that energy into their daily life. Ella realized that life didn't always follow simple patterns. People could crave connection, understanding, and companionship in ways that were complicated yet beautiful, and her father's actions were a testament to that quiet human truth. By the end of the week, she saw a new light in him, a gentleness mixed with subtle excitement, a tenderness that wasn't reckless but thoughtful, and a depth that she hadn't recognized before, as if the small, secret bond he had formed with Clara allowed him to appreciate the people around him more fully, to notice the little things, and to savor moments he had previously overlooked. Every phone call, every note, every soft smile seemed to ripple through the house, changing its rhythm, bringing warmth, curiosity, and a quiet magic that Ella had never experienced before, making her realize that human hearts were complex, capable of deep feeling, and that sometimes the most beautiful emotional stories unfolded in private, hidden moments that transformed people quietly, leaving them more alive, more attentive, and more open to love, empathy, and the subtle, enduring bonds that define family life. The quiet tension in the house grew over the following days, and Ella found herself more aware of her father's inner world, noticing the way he moved with careful thought, the way his eyes softened at unexpected moments, and the way his laughter carried a new warmth she hadn't heard before. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, she saw him sitting alone at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in his hands, staring at the steam curling into the air as if it carried memories and unsaid words. Something in the air told her it was the right moment to approach, and with a mixture of curiosity and concern, she asked softly, "Dad, are you okay?" Michael looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes before it gave way to a gentle vulnerability, a side of him she rarely saw. Sometimes, when your mom isn't here, I realize how much I've been holding back," he admitted quietly, his voice carrying a mix of longing and introspection. Ella sat down across from him, her heart attuned to the gravity of his words, sensing that he was about to share something that had been weighing on him for a long time. He continued, explaining that life's routines had quietly taken over, leaving him with unspoken emotions and a craving for connection that had nothing to do with rebellion or disrespect. He told her about Clara, a co-worker who had recently moved to town, and about the gentle bond they had formed, a connection built on letters, long phone calls, and shared thoughts that offered understanding and empathy he hadn't realized he needed. Ella listened intently, her initial curiosity giving way to compassion as she saw the humanity in her father's feelings. Michael spoke of moments filled with quiet joy and reflection, how he had discovered an emotional companionship that made him feel alive in ways that hadn't been part of his routine family life, yet he emphasized that it was entirely emotional, a channel for understanding and tenderness rather than physical attraction. He confessed that he had been learning about his own heart through these interactions, recognizing his capacity for affection, attention, and empathy, and realizing how much he wanted to bring that openness back into his family. Ella's mind was flooded with emotions, surprise, concern, and a growing admiration for her father's honesty and emotional depth. She saw him as someone navigating complex feelings with care, someone who sought connection without crossing boundaries or harming the people he loved most. They talked for hours, sharing reflections on life, love, and the quiet moments that shaped the heart, and Ella noticed a shift in her father's demeanor, a release of tension, a gentle acceptance of his own emotions, and a renewed attentiveness to the people around him. Michael described the little ways he had been channeling his newfound emotional energy into the family, small acts of thoughtfulness, longer conversations, a deeper appreciation for moments with her, and even subtle gestures to show Rachel, upon her return, that he valued her presence and the life they had built together. Ella felt a swell of understanding and empathy, realizing that her father's amazing act was not about betrayal but about acknowledging human needs for companionship, attention, and emotional intimacy. She saw how he was learning to balance these feelings with loyalty and care, understanding that love could be deep, layered, and sometimes complicated, yet remain respectful and gentle. In those quiet hours at the kitchen table, surrounded by the soft hum of rain, Ella felt the weight of emotional truth settling around them, a recognition that hearts could ache for connection even in healthy relationships, and that acknowledging such feelings could bring clarity, growth, and tenderness rather than harm. Michael's voice carried a softness that seemed to illuminate the room, and Ella found herself moved by the honesty, courage, and depth in his words. She realized that this moment, this open, heartfelt conversation, was shaping not only her understanding of her father but also her understanding of human emotions, love, and family bonds. By the time their conversation ended, the house felt lighter, filled with a new rhythm of trust, understanding, and quiet emotional revelation. Ella saw that her father's connection with Clara had served as a mirror, reflecting his desires, his empathy, and his capacity to feel deeply, and in turn, it allowed him to return to his family with a renewed heart, more attentive, more loving, and more present than ever before. The storm outside continued, but inside, a different kind of warmth settled over them, a warmth of truth, vulnerability, and the tender realization that emotional bonds could be acknowledged and respected, and that love, in all its forms, could teach lessons about connection, compassion, and the beauty of human experience. Ella left the table that night with a heart full of understanding and a quiet awe at her father's honesty, recognizing that sometimes the most profound emotional moments happen in private, in subtle, unspoken ways, and that these moments could transform lives, deepen relationships, and create lasting bonds built on truth, empathy, and genuine human connection. Weeks passed, and the quiet tension in the house slowly transformed into a gentle rhythm of understanding and emotional growth that Ella could feel in every corner. Michael, having confronted his own feelings and shared them with Ella, began to navigate his days with a newfound awareness, carrying the lessons of emotional connection into his family life without disrupting the bonds he cherished. He remained in contact with Clara, but it was a connection defined by distance, respect, and thoughtfulness, a reminder of the importance of listening, feeling, and appreciating subtle human connections rather than seeking excitement in reckless ways. Ella noticed how her father's demeanor had shifted. He smiled more readily, his gestures carried warmth, and even small moments like making tea, arranging the living room, or checking on Ella after school were imbued with a deeper attentiveness and tenderness. Rachel returned from her trip, and Michael approached her with a renewed appreciation, sharing stories of the quiet afternoons he had spent reflecting, emphasizing the small details he now noticed and valued in their life together. He listened more, spoke with gentleness, and made little gestures that spoke volumes, a hand on her shoulder, a shared laugh over something simple, a thoughtful question about her day. Ella watched this transformation with a mixture of relief, pride, and awe, realizing that what might have seemed like a dramatic emotional shift had, in fact, strengthened the family's bonds and deepened the love between her parents. The home itself felt lighter, warmer, filled with subtle moments of connection that brought everyone closer without grand gestures or overt drama. Michael's experience with Clara, though quiet and distant, had taught him the power of emotional honesty, the importance of acknowledging longing without acting recklessly, and the beauty of finding small ways to express care and attention. Even Ella noticed her own interactions with her father changing. She felt more open, more willing to share her thoughts and feelings, sensing that he could listen with empathy and understanding in a way that felt both safe and encouraging. The afternoons were filled with soft laughter, meaningful conversations, and an emotional intimacy that hadn't existed before, a quiet romantic energy that was gentle yet transformative, teaching everyone in the house the subtle value of attention, presence, and heartfelt communication. Michael and Rachel began to rekindle aspects of their relationship that had been dulled by routine, appreciating the quiet, tender moments that formed the backbone of lasting love, shared cups of coffee, evening walks, and small notes of appreciation left on the kitchen counter. Ella observed how love could be complicated, layered, and still remain pure and beautiful, realizing that emotional connection, honesty, and reflection were just as important as grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Michael had learned that acknowledging his feelings honestly, without acting impulsively or selfishly, allowed him to return to his family fully present, more loving, and more attuned to their emotional needs. The house, once heavy with silence and tension, now carried the soft hum of connection and understanding, where every gesture, word, and glance reinforced the strength of their family bond. Ella felt a profound sense of relief and hope, recognizing that human hearts were capable of longing and reflection, and that navigating emotions with care could transform relationships in quiet, powerful ways. The story of those weeks became a subtle lesson in emotional growth, romantic tenderness, and the delicate balance of love and fidelity, showing that even moments of longing or distant affection could be channeled into deeper appreciation and connection within a family. As days turned into evenings, and evenings into quiet nights, Ella understood that her father's amazing act was not about betrayal, but about learning to feel, to connect, and to return to the people he loved with a fuller, richer heart. The laughter at the dinner table, the soft conversations before bed, and the small gestures of care were evidence of this transformation, and Ella knew that the lessons of that period, empathy, honesty, emotional presence, and tenderness, would stay with her and her family forever. Michael had discovered that love was not static, it was a living, breathing thing that required attention, understanding, and the courage to feel fully, even in moments of quiet solitude. Through it all, the house became a place where emotional honesty, thoughtful reflection, and gentle romance coexisted, creating a home filled with warmth, trust, and the unspoken understanding that hearts could grow, heal, and connect in ways both subtle and profound, leaving Ella with a deep appreciation for the power of love, the beauty of human emotion, and the quiet miracles that unfold when people choose to feel, reflect, and cherish each other fully.